Good morning, everyone. We're continuing here in the words of the Mesilas Yesharim, speaking about the covet, the honor, the glory, and the respect that one has to give during mitzvahs. And he says beautifully today, "Va'amru," our sages have told us, "Rava Rame Puzmake Umatzale." When Rava would come to daven, he used to put on very nice shoes, and then he would pray. He had to make sure that he was dressed the finest possible. Amar, and he would say, "Why do I do this?" It says in the pasuk, "Prepare yourself, likros, to meet your God, Klal Yisrael," which he understood meant that when you're coming to daven, you're meeting with Hashem, you're talking to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You have to prepare yourself as if you would go to see a king or a very notable person. You would make sure that you were dressed in your finest, to look your best. You have an interview, you have a meeting, you're presenting yourself. So too over here when it comes to standing before Hashem. Rabbi, the sages also taught us. Ala pasuk, the verse says, "Big day Esav benach hamudais." It speaks about Rivka taking the clothing from Esav and putting it on her son Yaakov. And she took the big day Esav, which they were chamudais, they were the precious garments. What were these precious garments? Esav himself was a master of kibbud avim, of honoring his father. And every time that he would go to honor his father, he would put on the most precious of garments that he possibly could to show the respect to his father and this great mitzvah of kibbud avim. Amar Rabbi Shimon Gamliel said the following: "Call Yomai all my life, I served my father, it's true. However, I never did it with 1/100th. As in the same covet, the way that Esav served Yitzchak. Why? Ani shimashti es Abba, I serve my father wearing clothing that's dirty. Aval Esav k'shayim mishamish es Avi, but Esav, who was a big Rasha, when he would come and he would take care and attend to his father, he would only wear the royal garments. So that's Esav. Esav was so sensitive to the mitzvah of kibbud avim that he did it with heightened, elevated status by wearing beautiful royal clothing. So if that's what Esav did, if that's the way that it was appropriate for Esav to serve his father, who's flesh and blood, all the more so do we have an obligation that when we're standing in front of the King of all Kings, the Holy One, blessed be HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the fun of Liyaspalel, we are standing in front of him and we're davening. It's fitting that a person wears clothing that is considered to be dignified and honorable. And when you sit before him, you have to sit in front of him the way that you would sit in front of a king. And this is the way that a person approaches their tefillah. They say over from Rabbi Elyashiv Zatzal, he was extremely makpid, very strict to make sure that he was always groomed and his clothing was always neat and put together, that when he would be learning at 2:30 in the morning, he wanted to make sure that he's standing in front of Hashem, but sitting in front of Hashem, he looks his best. He was once in the hospital and he was very weak, and they didn't think that he was going to wake up for his early morning learning session, and they certainly were not going to disturb him. And the next thing they know, 2 o'clock in the morning, like clockwork, his eyes open, and he's lying there in bed, and he begins to tell one of his grandchildren who's with him that he's ready to arise and to learn. And then he begins to put himself together. He was lying there in the hospital bed, and he was wearing not the garments necessarily of that normally you would wear in the hospital, but he actually still had his clothing on. And his top button was unbuttoned. And although he was weak, he was trying very hard to button his top button to make sure that he looked and put together, and he was all in place in order to learn Torah in front of Hashem. He couldn't do it because the hands were too feeble at that time. So he asked his grandson, "Please come. I want you to button my shirt. I have to look proper in the eyes of the king before I learn." And there in the hospital, 2 o'clock in the morning, after some procedure or another procedure looming and waiting for him in the wings, Rabbi Elyashiv was concerned about one thing. I'm going to be sitting and learning in front of Hashem. I have to make sure that I look the most perfect that I possibly can. Hikaides, like it says, Hikon likras elokecha Yisrael, you prepare yourself to greet your Maker. And this is the way that a person approaches prayers. We have to put ourselves together a little bit at least. Comes to learn, we have to put ourselves together a little bit at least to go to do a mitzvah, try to look our best. And in that zechus, we show the tremendous cover, the honor that we have to Hashem, and the tremendous respect and the honor and admiration that we have for His mitzvahs. Have a wonderful day.